All right. Uh, very unprepared for this morning, or it's afternoon. I don't even know that it's morning. So Sam, I'm sorry. Sam was apparently watching and waiting for my. There's a lot of funny live stream comments already. Sam was making fun of my not being here thing. For example, this new Luke Thompson meditation app is pretty awesome. So I just mismanaged my time because hey Chad, sorry that I'm late, everyone. I had a friend, a friend of a friend, a guy I didn't even know. See, there are good people in the world. Is this that? So on Christmas Eve, my catalytic converter got stolen. Link already? I haven't even started talking about what I'm talking about, Sam. My catalytic converter got stolen. Whatever, I'll put it in because this is a crap show, and I don't know how long I'm going to be here anyhow. Sorry, I'm very distracted. And so, for me to fix it, I mean, I have a very old car with a lot of miles. There's probably nothing valuable left in that catalytic converter, and so now my car sounds like a beast and is very loud, and I need to get it fixed. But I don't want to put a new catalytic converter in it, so don't judge me. So I just had a friend who knows how to weld, a friend of a friend, and he came over and helped me weld a pipe to connect where they ripped out the catalytic converter and cut off a sawzall, whatever. And so now my car's not as noisy as it was, and I fixed it. Sam, you must be bored. Poor Sam.
I must be bored.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'm working, and it's like, do you know how few people like work this time of year? It's like
not very many.
My calendar is like literally empty. I am doing stuff, but well, here I am.
So, well, thank you for being here. I've been talking to my unnamed wife about your AI conversation. Is AI related to this?
You named the live stream ChatGPT Christians, and who do you say that I am? I don't think that AI is causing your catalytic converter to get stolen. I think that Black Lives Matter and its effect on the Minneapolis police system is what caused your catalytic converter to get stolen.
Is it ignorance? Is it ignorance that allowed my catalytic converter to get stolen, or malevolence?
Porque no las dos. Plenty of ignorance in the people leading the Minneapolis city government, and malevolence in the person wanting to steal it.
So I guess context, a little bit of context for the chat. My audio is probably not very good because I'm just going off my computer. But the idea of, I was talking to Kal about this, of the ChatGPT Christians and Anselman, God bless you. But I was reading through some of the comments of Anselman interacting with me, and it just popped into my head. And I told Kal, and I said, sometimes interacting with Anselman is like interacting with an Anglican ChatGPT, where it's just like you're just spitting me out the like canonized answers of what everybody's supposed to think about things. And what it relates to me is, I've said a lot that like just because you think you should believe something doesn't mean you actually believe it. So like there's a big difference between just spitting out to me the party line and what you really think about it.
Turns out Anselman's listening just for that.
Hey, Anselman! So it's a bit of a pejorative. I have a way, like with POS theology, of coming up with labels that ChatGPT.
ChatGPT. That would be good.
So I have a way of coming up with labels that I think are, should I remove you until you cover yourself? That I find that are provocative and also piss people off. Because I guess this is the thing for me. This gets to probably my personalist knowing. And at the end of the day, I don't think, like, this whole idea of like what is true and arguing for what is true I think can be very much sum it up in Jesus' thing of like, who do you say that I am? Like, it matters what you think. It matters what you care about at the end of the day. It doesn't matter what the right answer. This is what I'm getting at with like the whole you can be right and be wrong or be wrong and be right. It doesn't necessarily matter if you're right in the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. When Jesus is asking that, do you think that I almost sometimes get the impression like he's genuinely curious to know what is being said about him. And it's almost like, he's avoiding being narcissistic, but yet his apostles are more in tune with what's going on the street or something than he is. I don't know. I there's like such a weird vulnerability in that moment that it's a really weird detail in the Gospels.
It's like he's got the pleading eyes. He needs the affirmation.
Yeah, there is almost a little bit of that, because I don't think it's just a mental exercise that he's engaging his apostles to go through or something like that.
Yeah. Well, it kind of, I think it gets at what I talk about, like the hard problem of all perception. Like, I really do believe, and we were talking about this the other day, it gets really esoteric, but I think it's, on one level, it's really hard to wrap your head around, and on one level, it's really simple. I think it matters whether it's for Christianity or anything that's true. If people do not really want to believe it and act in accordance with it, like, it won't work. It'll all fall apart. Like, people actually wanting to believe something and matters. Like, you can't make yourself. This is why a lot of like the Christian new atheism, like, and deconstruction stuff, and that Polanyi quote I love, doubt and belief are ultimately equivalent. Doubt relies on a subterranean set of tacit belief in something else. Like, that whole frame is messed up because, like, you, at the end of the day, you really have to want to believe something for it to be fully true for you.
Well, that's the point, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Like when I think, Sam, you're kind of right. To an extent, but also I think, like, what if he asked somebody, well, who do you say I am? And they were like a crazy person, and he would just be like, sure. Like, is there a spot where he is there somewhere in the literature where he corrects somebody who says that he's something or whatever?
Well, he gets called a Samaritan and possessed by a demon or something like that.
And does he refute them?
Yeah, that's a good question. Good question. Let me pull up the good holy book on my web browser.
Well, here we go. So to your point, though, Chad, it's kind of like I would almost flip around the C.S. Lewis thing, liar, lunatic, or Lord, and just say yes.
Right.
Which one is he? Whichever one you see, that's what he is, because you are this is what I mean by, like, the person is the locus of meaning. There isn't meaning apart from what you want. Like, it's not our secret, sacred self individualism. Like, that you are necessary for reality.
It's kind of, he kind of backs that up by, you can't see until you can see, you can't hear until you can hear, or whatever it is that he says.
All right. So John 8:48, the Jews answered him, "Are we not right in saying that you are a Samaritan and have a demon?" Which is basically accusing him of being crazy. Jesus answered, "I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. Yet I do not seek my own glory. There is one who seeks it, and he is the judge. Truly, truly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death." And then the Jews said to him, "Now we know you have a demon." So he does correct them. He does say he does not have a demon.
Yeah, but they didn't call him a demon. They said he has a demon.
Right, which is basically accusing him of being crazy, or worse even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, all I know is my experience with this stuff is I couldn't concede, no matter how much I wanted to try to concede. And Bethel McGrew, when I met her, she said, "Oh, it sounded like you were going through spiritual warfare. You were demon possessed," which kind of made my skin crawl a little bit. But I think she's probably right to a degree, right? I mean, maybe that's why I identified so much with Legion. But I couldn't see until I could see, and like that had nothing to do with my timing or intellect or will or any of that stuff. So
Yeah.
sorry, awkward moment.
No,
I'm just
that's
being
fine.
Chad GPT, bro.
It's not awkward.
Have you ever been accused of having a demon, Luke?
Man, I don't know outright. I'm sure I have. I'm sure people think I do all the time. The way that my mind works. I finally became a member to PDK's channel, and so I watched Levi's interview, I guess, where everyone was saying the rando that reminded. Did you watch that one? Did he remind you guys of me a little bit? Well, you guys know me a lot more.
He's in the same personality quadrant, but not like exceedingly similar.
Yeah. He's kind of all over the place. I think the way that he sees and talks about things is very all over the place, or seemingly to a lot of people. But there are definitely connections. I don't know. I don't think people have thought that I have a demon. I mean, I've definitely had people like tell me I'm going to hell, which is probably the same. Have you ever had that happen?
Yeah, I've been accused of being literally demon possessed. My most recent excommunication trial was literally accused of being demon possessed.
Really?
Really? Yes.
Because
I was blind to the truth or something like that. Or, well, I was being interrogated by the pastor, and after about an hour of this, I was getting a little frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And my frustration was evidence of my demon possession.
Yeah. You're getting angry. You're getting angry.
Like, let me say enough things that are bad about you until you get angry. And then when you get angry, that'll be even more proof that you deserved everything bad that I said about you.
It's almost as if you see what you want to see.
Yeah.
Weird.
Or just good old fashioned gaslighting.
Yeah. So
it's not particularly fun to be in earnest accused by the person at the time who's your pastor of being demon possessed. Not great. Wouldn't recommend.
I think that sounds out of 10. A lot of fun, actually. I'd like that. I'd like that little conversation. I've had similar conversations. The first church that I started going to, that I got baptized in, when I had this event in my life, I noticed something was off about them, because like I'm not into the whole, I think COVID is bad and stuff. But what was weird was in the church, they're like, we're not wearing masks, and it was just, there's something about the spirit there that was like, ugh. Like, I went to a Bible study, and the lady was like, Joel Osteen will be dancing in the fires of hell. And I was like, really? Like, why do you say that? Like,
every day's a Friday, for him. So I bet Joel Osteen could actually be he could find his happy place in hell, which maybe is a compliment, I guess.
Dancing.
I like call her out on it in this Bible study. I'm like, who gives you the authority to say that? Like, seriously. And then that must have kicked something off, because the sermon a couple weeks later was like, you can't go to heaven on a higher power. which was a direct kick in the nuts from being an AA member. And so I didn't say anything. I just got up and walked out. And I'm like, I'm not going to do this with this church. I got a call the next morning from him, or the next evening, and he's like, I was really offended that you left during my sermon. And, I kind of would like you to apologize. And I'm like, what? I'm like,
what?
no.
Oh, goodness gracious. Well, how about
like,
asking about why I left during your sermon and if you offended me and if there's anything you might need to. Oh, Chad.
He said you should have stuck around. He was talking about the unnamed God in Acts, right? And that was the sermon. And then he said, you can't go to heaven on a higher power, blah, blah, blah. And I said, listen, I understand what you're doing. It's cool. I don't really have anything personally against what you guys are doing at this church. I just can't have any part of it. And he's like, I don't understand. And I said, well, I'm dealing with something here that's a matter of life and death. I don't care what God people worship. I don't. Like, it's my job to try and serve these people and let God do the rest of the heavy lifting. And he's like, well, I really think that AAs and errands and you guys are just, I said, have you ever read the literature? He said, no. I said, well, I don't know. If you want to go judge it, that's fine. But if I were you, I would read the literature. And he had this whole thing where he got sober off of cocaine, through Jesus, which is great. But just because that's your experience doesn't mean you should throw the rest of 12-step programs under the bus because they say something like, believe in a God of your own understanding. It's like, you're ridiculous, dude. And I'm not going to apologize to you for playing this weird game where people, it is literally, or actually, I'm sorry, Paul, actually a matter of life and death, but you're willing to just let people burn if they don't say, God or Christ is God, and you'd rather watch them burn than let them fumble around with the God of their own understanding. That seems absurd to me.
Well, I guess that's kind of my point of who do you say that I am? I guess I would posit that the only God that is the God of your own understanding. And I know that people who are within the subjective objective frame playing the either or game are gonna hear that as subjectivism and solipsism. But I was talking to Kal earlier today, I actually think objectivism is the solipsism. And this is the problem with Christ and Antichrist is, and I don't think the Christian foundationalist rationalists of all sorts really do enough. They do a lot of discursive reasoning and analysis and judgment externally. This is the whole be careful you who judge thing and take the log out of your own eye, but they don't really turn that logic around on themselves very much. Is you cannot divorce yourself from any perception, any apprehension of anything. You can't extract yourself from it. Who's measuring the measurer, who's perceiving the perceiver. You are always embedded in any perception that you have. You can't get away from it. You just can't. So to try to divorce yourself from that is ridiculous. So then, therefore, all you ever have is the God of your own understanding.
Right. So, you mean, so as somebody in errands, if they say Jesus Christi versus Jesus Christ,
no, that's close enough, Chad.
Right. I mean, but that's it's the Sam Harris move, or this weird, I'm going to use these tools where they apply where I best see them applying, and that's all. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was thinking about this subject in response to Peugeot talking with Russell Brand, because Russell Brand bristles at anything that touches on religious exclusivism. It actually seems to be one of his very triggering subjects. When he's talking with Peugeot, he's constantly peppering the conversation with anti-religious exclusivist taglines and phrases. it was almost a little weird. Like, it's like, okay, you can say that once, Russell, and we get your point or where you're coming from, etc. And like, it's like the fact that he was talking to a particular kind of Christian brought like a weird sort of, he always needs to be pushing the perennialist or pluralist button. And I was like, what's going on with that? And I think that, so we've been talking about the objective versus subjective. And I think like another piece of this is the intersubjective. Like in order for us to go to church together, we do need to agree about some things. Like for us to be having this conversation, we need to have a whole bunch of agreement about words and grammar and language and stuff like that. And like using the same word for God, the same word for Jesus and stuff like that is part of what makes communion possible. And religion isn't a solo sport, or is not best achieved as a solo sport. And even AA has its particularisms. It's interesting. It de-emphasizes denominational particularity, but it still has its rituals of, you have a particular day that you meet on a particular time. You say particular things at the beginning. You're not allowed to say, well, actually, I don't think we're Alcoholics Anonymous. I think that we are Pornography Addict Anonymous this week. That's the addiction of my own understanding that we're dealing with at this. Right? It does have certain things that need to be shared. You could say, I'm not saying objectively, but I'll say intersubjectively, that allow for communion. Yeah. That allow for communion to be possible and allow for it to be more than just one person doing one thing by themselves. It's the group that the group needs some sort of collective sharedness in order for it to work. And I think that that's what the hyper emphasis on, anti-exclusivism, perennialist pluralism that you saw in Russell Brand. I think that Russell doesn't understand the need for shared particularity to bind groups of people together to make a religion work.
Well, I think he does. It's just different. I mean, that's why I talk about like credo and religio, because I would say you have, or the Peter Rollins distinction between communion and community. Like, I would say what we have in this little corner or in this little area, like you and I or Chad or any of these people that I've been friends with for a long time, we have a shared way of being, but we don't necessarily, I mean, you could point to a few like credo things that we have in commonality, but I don't
say the word literal. Don't say the word objective.
Well, like even literal, I don't know. I was just on a walk. I went on a date last night with my daughter, and she'll say literally, it's a thing, and I'll just be like, that's not what that means, because some girl was walking along towards us and like on her phone and just like tripped and fell into this hole on the sidewalk. And my daughter was saying, and she said something literally, and I'm like, well, this is where it matters though. Like I said something like, there's a big difference between literally falling in a hole and figuratively falling in a hole. But we equate literally as physically, right? Like my body, materially, I fell into a hole. That's what people, when they're saying literally.
Or I'm speaking without figure of speech.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, like literally is a really confusing word when you go down that rabbit hole of what it really means.
Yes.
And so like all that to say is like we have I would say, to agree with you, and I think this is kind of like what dialogos is, or good faith conversation, or faith in general, any sort of transcendental thing. Like people, you can say, but this is where Christ and Antichrist come in. You can say that you're pursuing truth together, but I'll see that by the fruits. Like, are you absolutizing your narratival understanding of that truth and then colonizing and coercing and forcing everyone to agree with that? Well, then I would say you're not actually in submission in a being way to that transcendental. Right. You're actually just a colonizer.
Well, I think and
I think that's what Brand is afraid of. That's what Brand doesn't want. I don't want that, because that actually inhibits honesty.
But I think Brand's fear is preventing him has negative consequences that's preventing him from seeing the value of how to actually join and participate in a religious community.
He's not paying attention to his own experience. So in AA, I would say if we did have a creed, it would be the creed and the confession would be one and the same. It would be the first step. That I admit I am powerless over alcohol and that my life had become unmanageable. That's it. And so that's what we all rest on. We wouldn't do the rest of the work without that. And what I think Brand is probably writhing against is this. How do I say this? The same thing that kind of bothers me when I hear somebody use the phrase "the one true church." I'm like, oh, jeepers. But then I think about it, I'm like, well, I go to this particular church in Lebanon, Wisconsin, and I love that church. And I would say that that is the one true church. I wouldn't say that yours isn't, but that the one that I'm at is.
So to that point, Peter Rollins just had a great episode on this too. It's like when you say my wife is the most beautiful woman in the world, is that true?
Yes.
That's the one true church. There you go.
That's right. Yep.
It's the same thing.
And I hope that everybody's is. It's only when it becomes like, well, I'm gonna kill you because you're saying your church is the one true church. And I think that's what we're all kind of scared of happening again. And this is why I actually, just real quick, I'm gonna colonize y'all real quick. I've been thinking about a lot about the Troubles in Ireland and how we don't really pay any attention to them, and they're so close to us on a timeline. It's like it would probably be good to explore them a little bit. And also, I don't think that we've really dealt with what happened in 9/11. I mean, we've dealt with some of it, but not as much of it as we probably could. I think we haven't dealt with it kind of like some of us haven't dealt with our bad upbringings or something like that. Mm-hmm. Okay, pass.
Paul, is Living Stones the one true church?
Absolutely. And you're all heretics. Especially Luke. Luke's bigger heretic than Sam, even though Luke believes in the Trinity. I know that.
Yeah. What does it mean to believe in the Trinity? You know?
That's what I'm saying.
I have no idea. I've been wrestling with that question for just about 20 years now. I'm still not any closer. I know it's important to some people, but I don't know what it means.
I think your observation about Russell Brand is really good in that you're right. Part of, coming to terms with, wrestling with, I mean, we're still dealing with pluralism, and religious pluralism is a function of the same one true church question that you're talking with, because it's the same. It's the one and the many again. Russell Brand, well, that was quite a conversation with Peugeot, and Brand, Brand had to step away from. Here's a question: did Russell Brand ever sleep with more than one woman? Now, on one hand, physically, you can say Russell Brand slept with hundreds, thousands of women. Could Russell Brand see any of those women through the projection of his need? Then you're sort of into the addiction question. And so what was interesting to me about, listening again a little bit more closely when I made today's video about the Sam Harris conversation with Jordan Peterson, even Sam Harris is floating into this phenomenology that is the same drift, of course, that brings Peterson and Peugeot and all of this conflict between the one and the many, because the one is the one here or is the one out there, and then the many is always sort of between the ones. And what is the relation? I mean, Hinduism and Buddhism, what is the relationship between the one that is me and the one that is God? And I mean, it's no wonder we're struggling with this stuff. It's super hard, and it's what we've always been struggling with once you get to a certain point of understanding. That probably made no sense. Sorry.
No, it makes sense. But like, this is where I feel so grateful. I really wish everybody could just have the experience I had, where you just have some sort of strange conversion experience, and then all the really hard, dumb questions just evaporate. Like, and I was talking with Kal about that yesterday, and he said, "Well, like that, like you can still have them." I'm like, "Oh no, it wasn't Kal. I was talking to Neil." I said, "No, they just don't exist for me. Like, I believe it. I don't know how to explain that, but I don't know how you just get people to like have that experience." You know, and
that's what Sam is wrestling with. It's why he wants to do operation on people's brains. Oh, if we can only give them this experience so they would see the world.
But this is why all the people are so psychedelics prone. They're just like they
Or
want.
yeah, like Timothy Leary and like, oh, and the Grateful Dead. We just need to spike the water at Woodstock, and then we'll initiate the whatever majigger. Yeah.
Except
well,
it will be
said-
more like Batman and
But like
Scarecrow.
Neil said, he had this a strange experience like I had, and he had also tried those other things, and he said it was nothing like those other things. So,
Well, I think, Chad, don't you think it's interesting with Russell is he's a 12-step recovery guy, right? So he talks about that a lot. And so one of the things that I think is interesting for me when I hear him do that stuff, Sam, like, because I was noticing that too, but we hear a lot of that stuff in AA, right? Like, so that language, like where he slips in divinity to this, like there's this real sense of the higher power concept and the God of your own understanding. So because I've experienced it for over 20 years, that stuff just feels like I'm in AA in some ways, because people are they don't want you to use particularly they really get offended if you use the name Jesus, and you don't need to use the name Jesus in AA because you have all the language you need in the big book. You Father of lights, God, Creator, like all this stuff, right? But Chad, don't you feel
But
like
is that Jesus though, Lance?
Pardon me?
I was just saying, is that Jesus? Anyway, sorry.
So here's what I do as a Christian person. So right before we get into our 12 steps, and that first step that Chad talked about, there's a chapter to We Agnostics, right? And it's trying to speak to people that have all these hangups. And trying to get people just to open their minds. And at the very end of that chapter, and I say this on the very last sentences, when we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us, right? And so it is about, I've got this come through. So it is about God doing the disclosing, right? And so it's just getting people on this path of ascetical practices and repentance. And then what happens is in the 12th step, it's of having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, right? And so for me as a Christian man, what do I think? Like, well, I think when they're encountering the one true God, who do I think they're encountering? I think they're encountering him, Jesus, whether they call him that or not. Like, I feel like I don't have to worry about putting the name on it in that context. And when people start having these powerful experiences and everything else, regardless of what they're calling it, but they're real and tangible, well, who do I think it is? I think they're coming into contact with the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit.
But then what's wrong with just saying that?
But that leads to the perennialism that gets very slippery again.
Well, because for alcoholics, it was particular. Before AA, there was this group called the Oxford Group. And they basically had all the Jesus-E's in the 12-step recovery program. What you'll find is a lot of people coming into AA, and Paul runs into them in his all the time, they've been hurt by the church or someone within the church. And they're angry at the church and they're mad at Jesus, or whatever that might be, whatever that hang up is. And so when you strip all that stuff away and you just get them on this path to what really is the path to repentance and reconciliation and everything else, what you'll find with a lot of Christians, and there are a lot of lapsed Catholics in particular, but a lot of different sorts, fundamentalists or whatever that might be, is what will happen is the first few years, they'll end up having a God of their own understanding and a higher power, and they might even reject Christianity. But in the end, they find themselves pulled right back into that place, and they have a new encounter with Jesus that is fresh and is the God of their own understanding. And I think they become maybe even better Christians for it.
Well, and sometimes they don't have any of that. And I think that's great too, because they can still be useful to the guy who like myself, will not, concede. But like, I think you're right, Paul. This perennial thing, like I tried telling, this is what I kind of tried to bring up with Vervaeke. It was like this idea of your God of your own understanding. This, I think, actually, the Hersia Ali piece that you were talking about, like her psychologist or whatever that suggested, that came directly out of
Yeah. Yeah, when I heard that, I'm like, that does sound similar. Create the God of your own understanding, Ion. Yeah.
Yeah, that came directly from there. So these things floated out, and they float. We're all these trading cards of memes and ideas of understanding, and thank God for that. But the problem is like, yeah, I mean, there's a bad trade-off for that. We're going to kind of have to go to war. Some people will be very upset and they'll go to war over stuff like that.
Yeah. And one other thing I would just say is like within AA, it's a program of attraction rather than promotion. So how does a Christian man like myself survive within AA? Well, I don't have people know who you. I mean, basically they know, right? Like they know I'm a Christian dude. And so what happens is like you just yourself and you share your story and you share your wisdom and you can share your spirituality. There are times like I've mentioned that I use a Jesus prayer or other things like that, which is totally okay. During my share times, that's okay for me to do. But I'm just not overpowering in it. And what happens is you'll see that guy 2, 3, 4 years or whatever you know him, and all of a sudden they'll come up and they'll ask you the layup question because they want what you have. And they'll say, okay, can you talk to me about this, what you do? Like, I don't know, but you have something I want. And that's when it becomes easy because outside of the meetings, I get to share boldly kind of who I am, what I am, and my faith. And so really you just go in there and you're just a light, you're just there. You keep showing up. And eventually it's really great. The Holy Spirit does all the moving in my world. And when the timing's right, they come up and they ask you the layup question, which is tell me about this Jesus. And it's like, oh, great. I get to just tell you about it. So they initiate it. It's not me going have to try and convert it, if that makes sense.
But you still feel like that's still a good goal at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. See, here's the weird thing. I don't know what it is. Just like this. I mean, that's my like.
So what is that is the thing that you're excited when they ask you the layup question?
For me, because God is using me as kind of a vessel for that individual or that person. Like I can be the on-ramp and the pathway, and the person who can point to that. Like I really enjoy that. But I will just say this, and I know this gets really hard for certain Christian people to hear. Like I have friends that have never done that. And they'll be lifelong friends of mine. And I love them and I take wisdom from them or whatever. And they're not Christian, but they're sober and they're helping other people get sober and their lives are dramatically transformed. Their kids, their families, their communities. Like that doesn't bother me. Like it's really hard. Like I know it's this weird deal. I'm this evangelist or whatever, but I guess you have to be in the rooms, right, Chad, to understand. You just have to see it work, and then you're like, okay, like God's bigger than me and all this, and I'm just gonna let Him do His thing.
Yeah. So I'll say one last thing, and I'm gonna leave you guys alone on this. Like AA doesn't require any beliefs. It says we don't care what you believe. You don't have to believe anything. The question is, are you willing to believe? And that's where the big change happens. And so like when guys are like, what does that mean? I'm like, well, are you willing to do the steps? Are you willing to seek a power greater than yourself and ask yourself what those things are, and then or what that is, and then maybe even ask yourself where your prejudices come from. That's all it is, and then you just leave it at that's what I do. I've never done Christian evangelist work in AA at all, not even with the guys that sponsor, because it's just not useful. And I asked my sponsor once, like, how did you become Christian? He's like, I don't know, I always believed. And that's all he said. And I'm like, that's not useful, dude. So, all right, I'm gonna quiet down.
I mean, I think part of this is because the hell of addiction seems more real than the hell of hell.
I've seen hell. I know what hell is.
But
oh yeah, we got this saying in AA that says, religious people are afraid of hell, spiritual people have been there. Something like some weird shit like that.
Uh-huh.
Well, I think AA has always been for me such an interesting test case because it challenges a lot of the older formations that we had that tended to be a little bit feverish with respect to propositionalism. And when Chad says you don't need to believe anything, well, what do you mean by believe? Because someone who goes to a meeting at least has the kernel of trust that maybe, just maybe, this will help me out of my hell. And so that's belief. And again, that's part of the reason I keep translating believe, as we have in many of our translations, into trust, which is pistis. It's a valid translation for the word, pistis, is someone who goes to AA has the tiniest little seed that, or maybe even just hope. Maybe, but maybe this will help me out of my problem. And of course, they probably have no understanding of, as they get further into it, they're going to begin to realize the sacrifice this is going to entail on their part, that they are going to have to submit to a whole bunch of things if they are actually going to change. But that little faith is a mustard seed. It's a kernel that, that in context of AA grows. And then there's all of this, Lance, when you made that move about hell, that's exactly the Jordan Peterson move. And when Jordan Peterson talks about hell, and he kind of gets a little shellacking from Christians, usually Protestants, that are like, well, what, because we got Descartes in this whole business too. Sam, your conversation with Vervaeke was awesome. That was a tremendous conversation, and I was so happy to see that. But so all of the stuff we're talking about in this corner, we've really gotten at a bunch of the stuff that is beneath the cultural layers of a lot of these inflection points. Now, we haven't mastered them, and I don't know that we ever will. But part of the reason this is so addictive, dare I say that, in this, within words of 12 steps, part of the reason this is so engaging for us is we do have an intuitive sense that, okay, we're on the right track, and we've got that little mustard seed that says maybe with these crazy conversations with Luke and Lance and Chad and Abby and Sam, we're actually getting somewhere, and I think we are. So it's super exciting. But it's always, again, part of my belief is that in this world, this world is incapable of getting us what our hearts really desire. That's that C.S. Lewis move. And
sorry.
Go ahead, Chad.
No, please finish.
No, and just that, that's part of what we're discovering in this little corner, and why it's helpful for us, because we are dealing with the pluralism, and that's why it's super important to have, former Calvinist Luke and Unitarian Sam and non-theist John, and how can we categorize Jordan? So we're working on this right now. We're making the steps and doing the steps as we're talking. A very weird program.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting to Sam, whoever said Sam's point about hell, is, so I go to detox like every Sunday, and I try to carry a message in there to people. And you can say the word God, and it will. Those people are like dying, and they'll be like, "Oh God," bleh, and they'll get pissed. But if you mention the word hell, they'll listen. So one of the things I've stole, probably the only thing I've ever brought into my recovery lexicon when it comes to carrying a message is from Peterson, is there is no bottom to hell, and that they can relate to. So I think that's interesting. They'll be like, because that's their experience. It's like, oh, it got worse one time, like a month ago, and I'm back here, and it's worse than the last time, and it said it wouldn't be worse. So that's interesting to me, and I think maybe if you want to see, like, my hope for whatever it is that we're doing here, some of my favorite stories about 12-step stuff, as far as like I was just talking about the Troubles in Ireland. Well, there's stories of people, Protestants and Catholics, both drunks at AA meetings, that would be fighting in battle, but when they're at that meeting, they're not doing that. That's something else. So, like, that's what I hope that we can do. That's what I hope we're
Is
doing.
there, because they have community over a common powerlessness, a common lack.
Right, and we
Although
can't
I
see
do
that.
feel
We're
like
already
there's
swimming
still
in that.
some slipperiness going on, the perennialist slippery trick that fails to recognize its own particularity in some kind of weird performative contradiction.
Well, there's a really, Joseph shared a really great debate between two different Jewish cats. One of them was Zevi from Seekers of Unity, and one of them was another guy who I don't know as well. And they debated that exact thing. Like, is perennialism basically veiled absolutizing ideology?
That hides itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like that's sort of similar to the point I was making about the thing that Paul clipped from the live stream the other week about the secret power of Unitarianism being liberalism and secularity, is that by transforming itself into the perennialist thing, it tries to hide its actual identity and is able to slip under people's radar and get it to have allegiance to it without being noticed that it's even a thing. And
Well, Sam, this is interesting. Like, so I hear you talking about this, and it's a great point. And it's so, but isn't there a fine line between perennialism and kind of what I'll just say, the mystery or the hiddenness of God and some of these things? I mean, so I totally get what you're saying, but some of that is, you're asking me the question how I could do that. And so I think in some ways, I can see the perennialist objection, but then yet there's this thing that's over here, and I would say this is Luke, what Luke embodies, which is I think he does embody it, and he talks about it, which is just all this hiddenness and this mystery, which could be called perennialism, but it's not always that.
Well, I mean, there's some amount of like the epistemic humility of that we don't fully know God, and because of that, we don't know who else doesn't fully know God either. Like, I get that. Like, that's part of it. And one should also say that this perennialist trick can be quite effective. Like when, like the story that Chad shared was a perfect example of, okay, AA can get, a Protestant and a Catholic in the Troubles time in Ireland to sit down and help each other, because it's getting people to not notice that it is creating a group identity that is above the two identities that they're warring within. And, to a certain way, the secular West has been able to do that, of getting people who have different particularities to unite into something larger without realizing that. But I think what's the problem, like what's that Tim Keller divide, Paul, that's in that clip that you play all the time, programmatic secularism versus procedural secularism, right, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think what the perennial temptation of perennialism is that it starts out doing the procedural thing of, hey, let's lay down our differences and get along in the larger container. But then pretty soon the larger container starts making demands on the people who are in it in a way that is hard to recognize at first.
Well,
and I think,
what perennialism are you talking about?
Wait, is this
all perennialisms? All perennialisms are the same.
No, they're
okay,
not.
so
No, they're not.
I'll keep listening.
That was an ironic joke, Nate.
Oh, okay.
So here's what I'm wondering about, because I am at a Lutheran church, and though I don't consider myself a Lutheran, I'm a member of this church. Now, because I don't like a lot of Luther stuff. Now, is this the perennial thing that you're talking about, Sam? Because like the other day, my pastor said something like, Luther regarded music as the highest thing next to Christ, or something like that, or the next thing.
One of Luther's best ideas, but yeah, something like that.
Right. But then I go and I look up like what he said about Mary, and I thought, well, that's just stupid. Like, so this like idea that, I don't know, the idea of that Mary she should be honored and respected like other men, but no greater than them, is ridiculous to me. But like, so this perennial trick is like, well, I'm a member of this church and my wife and I are here and I like these people. Is that the trick that you're saying? And this is the benefit I'm playing with it? Or and that AA kind of instilled in me?
Well, I think if you understand Christianity, you have to understand that it is a perennialism, like at its core, which is why Augustine can say in the Retractions, there has only ever been one true religion, and Christianity is its current form and final form from Augustine's perspective.
Let's just quote,
which Barfield footnotes in Saving the Appearances, by the way.
Nate, let's just quote great quotes from like Augustine and Calvin. That's what Cal was telling me the other day. He's like, it's so great. He said Calvin quotes that go unexpectedly hard is such an elite genre of quotes.
Yeah.
Well,
Because there are these great Calvin quotes too.
There are a lot of great Calvin quotes.
For there to be a universalism, and for something to be a universal. When I said universalism, I didn't mean no eternal conscious torment. I mean, for there to be a universal, there has to be a perennial. So that aspect.
And there has to be a particular, which is that's the scandalous part of Christianity, right? Is that
there's the other side? That's right.
That it's both the perennial and the universal in the absolute particularity of the person of Jesus Christ.
Yes,
right.
and now that historic, literal, scientific, critical Jesus Christ has become the universal that needs to be particular.
Right.
Factually and everything else.
And that's where, again, when I was talking about the one and the many, and that's part of, it's not exactly what Lewis is talking about in A Severe Mercy, but when he's sort of weighing between Hinduism and Christianity, he basically says Christianity better than Hinduism got the balance of the universal and the particular better.
And the way in which Christology feeds naturally into Trinitarian theology and that problem of the one and the many is exactly why Unitarians have to be wrong.
Yeah, but here's how they're not wrong. Here's how they're not wrong.
Sorry, Sam.
I want to know. Go ahead, Chad.
The one way that they're not wrong is like if you would have asked me beforehand, before meeting any of you weirdos, like what is a Catholic, what is a Protestant, what is a Unitarian, I would have had zero idea. All I knew is that it was you Christian weirdos over there. And there are a lot of people like this. My wife sponsors a gal who ended up coming into the church by first coming to AA. Then she was like, no to the God thing. But then she was like, well, I guess I'm willing to seek something. So she started with crystals. And then she went from crystals to watching Joel Osteen on television. And then she went from Joel Osteen on television to taking her fiance to a church and becoming a member, like a really regarded member of that church. So, yeah, I mean, Christ is universal because, like, most of us don't. I think in our culture, it's weird. Something is happening. Do you guys know about how, like, blues music was lost in America? Like blues started in America and then it went away, and we forgot about it. We didn't like it, and then all of a sudden, like the dudes,
it had to get re-given to us from England. Yeah,
right. That's what I think is kind of happening with Christianity right now. So
Chad, it's like,
that's interesting, Chad. That's interesting. The like, I'm gonna let you finish, Luke, but I'm gonna riff off of what Chad said about blues. Like one thing that was like my dad growing up in 1950s Chicago at certain points lived about say 10 miles away from some of the best blues music in the world, right? Like Muddy Waters and all of them were on the south side of Chicago at bars that that my grandma would not have let my dad go to, that were playing the best blues music in the world. And my dad would never have been allowed to interact with that. But he can listen to the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, who are playing basically some imitation of that music that they learned via records, and it's coming all the way from England. And so, like, why does my dad need to get exposed to the blues from England as opposed to the south side of Chicago? And I think that, and that seems to be something.
Let him go there for real reason.
Well, where did my grandma grow up? She grew up on the south side of Chicago prior to the Great Migration, back when the south side was the nice side. Her neighborhood went to crap, and she had to flee to the north side. And so, of course, she's not going to let her son go to the south side of Chicago and listen to those juke joints. And so, therefore, my dad listens to the Rolling Stones and not Muddy Waters, even though the Rolling Stones' biggest influence is Muddy Waters, who's on the south side of Chicago. And so what you're saying, Chad, when like I was hearing you and Lance talk about like, okay, you've got these, you know, Catholics who have become addicts of various kinds, and their family probably was not very nice to them during their addiction downfall. And so they have this bad taste in their mouth about Christianity and Jesus and the church and these judgmental family members or society members or friends or whatever. And so then they need to get like retold about, oh, hey, there's this higher power. Oh, okay, actually, you know, we can call him God or divine too. That's, you know, whatever equivalent phrases. And after a series of steps that might involve Joel Osteen or not, then you end up back in church and you can say Jesus again, but you had to go on this weird finding it from the outside sort of thing. I don't know. That's interesting, Chad.
So I think that's, I mean, well, so this is related. I'm probably going to have to cut this off soon, but this is related to the ChatGPT Christians and who do you say that I am? Sometimes in order for your belief to become in its fullness, rather than something you just affirm in your ideas, it has to go out from you and come back another way. And I would say this is almost where like Christianity is unavoidable and where it's colonized the world in somewhat ethical, secular terms, right? Is that like, who was just saying this the other day? Something like, the idea that like we shouldn't be fighting wars now, like that's a Christian idea. Like in the ancient pre-Christian times, they would have just been like, I just killed 1 million people and I am awesome. Like that's impossible in the modern world. Nobody's thinking that, at least within a like Western Christianized context. Like those values are universal.
I don't know why Paul's laughing. He might have said something.
Because Sam refuses to sign up for Trinity Broadband.
I agree. It's kind of coming back. And also, Phlebas, so here's the thing. Like, okay. I just want to say, like, I don't know how smart I am, but I am smart enough to realize the kind of logistician trap that everybody tries to put me in, of being like, well, in your anti-propositionalness, are you being propositional? I get it. I get it. Okay. I really do. I understand it. So like when I say, judge not, and non-judgment is the rule that survives its own judgment, I'm not then in turn, hopefully, judging the people that are judging. I get it. I'm just talking. I mean, I don't know how else you want me to communicate it. Like a sign language? I could write you a poem about it.
That would be nice. An interpretive dance.
No, he just wants you to continue to reiterate it so that you can colonize the rest of us with your language. That's all.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Paul?
I love Luke. I love you all. I really do. And Matt says I'm a lamb in the video and I'm a lion in the comment section. But I do. That's the thing. If I knew Sam Harris in real life, I'd probably be much nicer to him on the internet. Than maybe even defend him.
Or not. Or maybe not.
That's true too. But it's you know, and part of what makes this corner work are the differences. So there used to be these two listservs in the CRC that I participated in. One was CRC Voices, where there was always a fair amount of disagreement, and the other was Calvin in Common, where everyone agreed that George W. Bush was the devil himself because he was trying to run a theocracy in America, which was total bullshit. So I came into that group, and I you know, politically I had a lot of alignment with them, but I differed from them. But they were tyrannical. They didn't really want any difference. They wanted an echo chamber. And every community sort of figures out what is tolerable and what is not. And nobody sort of sets that, and it's sort of like an estuary conversation that the spirit sort of arises from within. And we're just been sweetly blessed in this corner in many ways to have the, I mean, if you just who's in this little group of 5 right here, I mean, this is astounding.
I wanted to make sure that I came back so I didn't make it look like that I showed up just to dunk on Sam and then leave. Because that was not my intention at all. I got a call from one of my employees. He was having trouble. We're getting close to the deadline for end of year training, and he was having trouble with one of his training modules where it wasn't letting him in, so he called me for help. So.
But it's also interesting that, I mean, this is part of why evangelicals say this thing, which always grinds me, which it's a God thing. And I'm a troll then. I'm like, what? You mean like the sunrise? Everything's a God thing. I mean, God number one, the arena. But, we've been blessed with some really interesting people who have participated, like Phlebas. Phlebas is hardly ever on a live stream, but Phlebas is often in the comments, and we've just been really blessed. And Anselman, so yeah, show us a world where Anselman gets along with Luke and Nate and Jacob.
I'm not sure if we've gotten to that world yet.
No, we haven't, but he's still here, and we're still, we bug each other sometimes, but what's amazing is that we've been doing this for years now. And yeah, there's a lot of churn. A lot of people have participated, sort of fallen away, and we've been in different instantiations. But I see this as a gift from God for us, for our welfare and our blessing, and to bless the world. So it's not a church, but oh gosh, but it's one of these weird things.
Yeah. Anselman, now that there are members only section randos videos, I think it's a great opportunity for you, Anselman. Yeah.
I'd love to do a randos convo with Anselman.
Yeah, even if it's member section only.
I'm trying to get Phlebas off his ass so we can do a randos. Come on, Phlebas.
Yeah, Phlebas, I'd happily do. Phlebas is a member. I mean, totally. But
I will pay to see my brother-in-law.
Oh, okay.
On a randos conversation, I will make sure to send you a big fat super chat if that happens.
It may be that all of those people have way more sense than any of us who are out here sharing freely in this wild open sea of an internet. That someday some of us are going to get bit by this. So
no more sense than
So when I was when I first graduated from college, I was living in Madison, Wisconsin, and some cute girl in the church said, "Hey, they need more male volunteers in the middle school ministry. You should do that. You'd be good at it." I ended up marrying that girl, but in the meantime, I volunteered in the middle school ministry. So last night, I got a text from one of my middle schoolers who's now graduated from college, and it turns out really likes John Vervaeke. And I'm like, oh, well, you're about to find out some stuff about my theology that you didn't quite know when I was your middle school leader. And then he, of course, texted all the other middle schoolers in my group. And so you never know who's out there listening, and you don't know if they find out if it'll be a bad thing or a good thing. And he texted me again today and was like, Sam, if I have some theology questions, could I ask you? I'm like, yes.
No, don't ask Sam. Don't ask Sam.
No, do ask Sam.
He'll send you down the wrong way.
I'll tell you what, when it comes to theology, well thought out, sincere answers are the best answers, whether they're the right answers or the wrong answers.
Who do you say that I am?
Because you're getting an example of the heart with which you should do theology, which is a sincere desire to know the truth, which Sam clearly and consistently demonstrates.
Yeah, that's true.
All right.
Sam,
okay, your dunking has been forgiven. Yes, Chad? You're asking about my wife?
Yeah, when you first, because I'm certain that she wasn't a Unitarian, was she?
No, she grew up Lutheran in a church probably very similar to the one that you're going to now.
So how did that happen? How did that work out? See, this is what's beautiful. This is why we should probably pull our head out of our ass, because this is a good story that we should listen to and pay attention. Go.
What happened? What was my wife's process in all this? So we met. So my wife grew up in not very far away from you, Chad, honestly, in eastern Wisconsin. Grew up Lutheran. Her family had been Lutheran since Martin nailed some theses to a wall in Germany. And she kind of became evangelical in college, I would say. She had something like a born-again experience through a campus ministry in college and got rebaptized, which her parents had sort of mixed feelings about. And then she joined an evangelical church in Madison, which when I moved to Madison was the same. It was basically the Willow Creek of Madison, Wisconsin. The assistant pastor at the time was Tim Mackey of Bible Project later fame.
Oh.
And so she was evangelical in that setting. And we started dating about like our 5th or 6th date. I told her about my theology and the story of what had happened to me in college. And she had been in the same college ministry, but in the UW chapter, and I had been in the Cornell chapter. So it was like very easy for her to understand and relate to that story. We actually even knew people in common from like that college fellowship. And so she was just very nice and sympathetic about it. She didn't immediately change her mind, but she's like, well, you seem like a Christian to me. They even let you lead Bible study at our Bible study sometime. So how bad can this guy be, really? And I think only later did she learn the actual consequences that this thing can have. And the best way to convert someone from Trinitarianism to Unitarianism is just get some Trinitarians to treat a Unitarian that you love really badly, repeatedly. And that is extremely persuasive towards. So she, especially this year, with our most recent getting kicked out of the most recent church and then going to the Unitarian conference with me, really sort of embraced her latent Unitarianism, I would say. So that's the story of my wife's Christological journey. So everyone can get mad at me for confirming their worst fears about what sort of influence I have on people. But I'm telling you, it's not me who's the most persuasive one. It's the anti-persuasive, angry Trinitarians that are the most effective evangelists.
And people don't know why I'm winsome.
All right.
Thank
I
you.
gotta go.
Anselman got beat up by a Unitarian gang once. You see, this is why you need to tell your story, Anselman. I would love to hear about that. I have never once met a Unitarian gang, so I would love to hear about it.
They must be in Scotland. These
In
gangs
Scotland.
of Unitarians roaming around Scotland.
It must have been during the Troubles or something like that.
I mean,
I should go. I should write a sermon. I should work for Living Stones, but love you guys. Sam,
Yeah.
why do you have a shitty internet connection? You work in tech.
I know, but I only have limited options. It's probably I have Google Maps open in the tab. If you have Google Maps open, that's a huge drag. Anyway, how about now?
Google, you're still frozen.
Not good. I'm still frozen.
Well, your audio comes through fine, but your picture is just like, maybe 2 frames a second.
All right, gentlemen. Well, Nate,
How
we
about
need to talk. We need to figure out some time to talk.
Yeah. Send me a message. You know how to DM me, so we'll figure it out.
Hard to
We'll
coordinate.
figure it out.
That's why these live streams.
Basically, my availability is pretty simple, Luke. It's like I'm either available in the very early morning specific time, before work on weekdays. I start work at 7 a.m., but I'm up at like 4. So there's a window in the morning before work, and then I'm off work at 4. And if it's not a night where I have estuary or a church commitment or something like that, then I'm usually available in the weekday evenings.
All right.
So,
All right.
Well, thank you guys.
I'm going to write a sermon. Thursday sermon day.
All right.
all right.
Blessings, everybody.
Bye, everybody.